Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a heavy, fascinating stack of sources today, and the mission is pretty clear.
Okay.
We need to filter out the noise.
So much noise.
We're diving deep into these themes of, well, profound disconnection. There's this massive gap between what the official data is telling us and what people are actually feeling.
Right.
And then there's the disconnect between technology's dizzying promise and, the quiet cost to human jobs.
And policy. The distance between what a policy is supposed to do and what happens on the ground.
Exactly. That's the perfect framing. The core challenge across all these reports
Yes.
is just navigating information that is either delayed or heavily spun or just unstable.
It is. We're dealing with what economists are calling noisy data, partly because of political disruption. We're also dealing with deliberate distortion when it comes to things like tariffs.
And the AI anxiety. It's so hard to tell where the science fiction ends and the testable hypothesis even begins.
Exactly.
So we're here to cut through all of that for you, the learner, and find the underlying facts that truly matter. And our journey starts, well, it starts right in the wallet,
It has to.
because that's where the data noise is the loudest. And that feeling of disconnection is the most visceral.
It is. So let's start with the U.S. government data, which on paper actually shows some progress.
Right.
The official figures show inflation is slowing down a lot. It's now tracking at about 2.7% annually.
Which is getting pretty close to the Federal Reserve's target of 2%.
Very close. So if you just read that headline, you'd think, okay, this is solid news.
But the sources we're looking at immediately flag how noisy these figures are. What does that actually mean in, practical terms?
It means we can't fully trust the month-to-month comparison. The data it's described as unusually noisy because, as the sources detail, a 43-day government shutdown really messed up the data collection process.
It just threw a wrench in the works.
A huge one. Imagine trying to hear a vital economic whisper during a storm. The information is cut off, the samples are disrupted, and that leaves experienced economists very, very cautious.
And cautious how? What's the actual risk of this noise?
The risk is a misread of underlying pressure. One Goldman Sachs strategist specifically warned that these missing reports might be hiding some persistent inflationary pressures.
The very things the Fed needs to see clearly.
Exactly. Before making critical decisions like cutting interest rates, they might be basing policy on incomplete data, which is a huge vulnerability.
Okay, so let's hold that 2.7% number in one hand and the lived experience in the other. This is where it gets really interesting for me. Why don't Americans feel that relief?
It's the cumulative effect.
The buildup.
The buildup. We often overlook it when we only focus on the current rate of change. Yes, price growth has cooled off from its peak, but families have endured years, literal years, of elevated high costs for everything: housing, groceries, utilities.
So the price level itself is just permanently reset higher.
Yes, exactly. That feeling of being squeezed doesn't just vanish because the rate of increase slows down. Perception lags.
So even if the price of bread is only going up by 2.7% this year, if it doubled over the last 3, you're still paying nearly double.
Absolutely. People feel worse off, not because inflation is accelerating right now, but because the cumulative price hikes have just fundamentally eroded their purchasing power. That emotional reality is years behind the official metric.
And that economic tension, it brings us neatly to the political rhetoric surrounding it. We saw President Trump deliver this highly charged address.
Described as fast and harsh.
Right. Blaming opponents, repeating familiar themes on tariffs, and unfair trade.
And this is a perfect example of how numbers can be deliberately distorted. He claimed that tariffs have generated many trillions of dollars in revenue for the U.S.
Okay, the fact check on that number is critical.
It is, and it's definitive. Independent analyses show the tariff revenues are in the tens of billions per year.
Not trillions.
Not even close to trillions.
Right.
But let's just step back to the basic economic principle. A tariff is a tax on imports.
Right.
And while they do raise government revenue, that cost is typically passed on to consumers, to you, through higher prices.
So the principle is that consumers pay. Why do governments keep using them? What's the strategic argument the sources touch on?
Well, the strategic argument is that they can be a tool for negotiating leverage or for protecting certain domestic industries. But the assertion, the pure rhetoric that they generate massive, cost-free, free money for the Treasury.
With no cost to consumers.
Right. That's just inconsistent with standard trade economics.
No.
The distortion here is about exaggerating the benefit while totally ignoring the costs.
Okay, that's a necessary fact check. Now let's pivot. Let's look at the new friction, the digital revolution.
Yeah.
AI, the anxiety around it is huge.
It is.
We're seeing intense discussion about building digital brains and whether AI might actually become conscious.
This is such a complex area. I mean, scientists are very clear that current large language models, they do not meet any standard definition of consciousness.
They're just pattern matching.
Extremely sophisticated pattern matching machines, yes. Not sentient beings.
But the research frontier is moving, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that some leading figures are arguing that as these systems get more real-world sensory inputs, sight, sound, touch, the question could move from sci-fi to a testable scientific hypothesis.
The difference between simulating intelligence and actually experiencing the world.
Precisely.
And in the meantime, AI is already displacing human labor, not with consciousness, but with extreme efficiency, especially in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. The reports are about AI generating photorealistic virtual performers, de-aging actors, automating background roles.
The studios must love that. The cost savings, the flexibility.
It's tremendous upside for them. You don't worry about an actor schedule or union rules if your talent is synthetic. But this is hitting the labor unions very hard.
And the key takeaway from the sources isn't some mass layoff of A-list stars. It's something quieter.
Far quieter and more insidious. The unions are warning that digital doubles and synthetic actors are eroding opportunities before anyone gets hired.
So the jobs just disappear before casting even begins.
They quietly vanish. The sources are clear. Little proof of marquee stars being replaced today, but tons of evidence that AI is displacing routine tasks and background work. It's the classic automation pattern. It always hits the most standardized roles first.
That idea of quiet displacement.
Yeah.
It connects directly to this huge cultural migration we're seeing with the Oscars.
Right.
The Academy Awards signed a deal for YouTube to stream the event exclusively worldwide, starting in 2029.
Yeah, that's a big one. ABC keeps the broadcast rights until then, but this move is driven by necessity.
The ratings.
The ratings have just tanked. From around 55 million viewers in the late 90s to maybe 20 million recently, they need a younger global audience. And a free online platform is the only way to reach them at scale.
So this is the bigger picture. Distribution always follows audience behavior.
Always. It's the defining trend of the last century of media. From radio to broadcast TV to cable, and now to mobile and on-demand streaming. The Oscars are simply adapting to the reality of how you consume entertainment now.
Okay, let's move to policy flashpoints. These are choices that really expose the stress fractures in our social systems. And this connects right back to that theme of the experiential gap.
It does.
We have a very difficult, widely discussed case profiling Jolene Van Alstyne in Saskatchewan, Canada. She has a rare disease, says she can't get the surgery she needs, and has been approved for MAID medical assistance in dying.
This case is just incredibly complex and heartbreaking. She describes years of extreme, debilitating pain and feels that assisted death is her only way out because the system failed to provide treatment for a potentially treatable condition.
Which has fueled immense controversy. Critics are arguing that a wealthy welfare state shouldn't be presenting assisted death as the solution for people who can't access timely health care.
This really gets to the single most important question about MAID policy. Legally, it's intended for last resort cases. Irremediable suffering. But this case highlights a clear systemic risk.
Which is?
When healthcare access fails, an option that was meant for individual autonomy can start to look like a substitute for comprehensive care rather than a complement to it.
Is it really autonomy if your only other choice is years of agony because the system failed you? That's the ethical weight here.
Exactly. The debate shifts entirely. It becomes less about whether assisted death should exist and more about whether health systems are robust enough to make sure no one feels driven to choose it just because they couldn't get basic treatment. A profound gap between policy and reality.
That's an incredibly difficult story. It really underscores how system failures affect individual lives. Let's shift our focus to another area where systems are being tested, U.S. immigration, with this new denaturalization push.
Right. The internal guidance for USCIS is to generate around 100 denaturalization referrals a month. That's a huge increase.
And the stated goal?
Officials say they're targeting those who unlawfully obtained citizenship. Alleged fraudsters, gang members, serious criminals. Supporters see it as protecting the integrity of the process.
But scaling it up that quickly, that raises immediate red flags about due process. What are the specific concerns?
Two main things. First, the risk of errors and politicization when you're working with what looks like a quota. And second, crucially for you, the learner, is the creation of a chilling effect.
Explain that. What's the chilling effect in this context?
It means the fear of scrutiny deters legitimate behavior. If the criteria broaden beyond clear fraud to subjective things like public safety threats, it creates deep anxiety in immigrant communities. People might not engage with government services for fear that some minor error from decades ago could be used to question their citizenship.
For people who have lived as citizens for years, that must be terrifying.
It raises real due process concerns that merit very careful scrutiny.
Okay, before we close this section, a quick dip into political showmanship. We saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's remark that she would stomp Vice President J.D. Vance in a hypothetical 2028 race.
And that became an instant media focal point. But what's fascinating is how the rhetoric clashed with the reality cited in the sources, the actual poll that fueled this.
Showed them in a statistical tie.
A statistical tie, 51% to 49%, essentially a coin flip. So the stomp comment was rhetorical noise.
Designed to generate buzz, get donors excited.
Exactly. It's pure showmanship. The data itself is a perfect mirror of the highly polarized, deeply divided electorate we see today.
Okay, we've looked at policy down here on Earth. Let's look up to the real friction happening in orbit. We're seeing rising tension with U.S. and Chinese satellites engaging in what's described as dogfighting-style maneuvers.
Yeah, close approaches, shadowing, possible electronic interference. This is serious stuff.
So what's the goal here?
Analysts see it as direct competition over space-based reconnaissance and communications. If you can blind or disrupt your opponent's satellites, you gain a massive strategic advantage on the ground.
But the danger is miscalculation.
Immense danger. If a close approach maneuver is misread as an attack, an attempted ramming, the consequences could escalate incredibly fast. You could create a debris field, trigger a real-world conflict, all based on something that happened in orbit.
On a slightly stranger note, the sources mention these unusual aerial sightings. A flock of UFO-like lights over a Wyoming power station.
The careful approach here is essential. Unusual sightings absolutely warrant investigation. But the cautious view remains grounded in history. Past cluster sightings, once you look into them, often turn out to be high-end drones, aircraft, or just atmospheric effects.
So, measured curiosity.
Exactly. Acknowledge the unidentified, but remember that extraordinary claims require exceptional evidence.
Finally, let's wrap up with this culture of unease on the ground. It really encapsulates this whole theme of the experiential gap. We're seeing reports examining the rise of small-time scamming.
Yeah, shoplifting, return fraud, petty online schemes. The argument in the sources is that this behavior is becoming dangerously normalized.
Why?
3 factors, really. Economic pressure, a low level of social trust, and this perception that everyone is gaming the system, especially the people at the top. When people feel the economy is rigged, their own ethical boundaries start to erode.
It's a loss of faith in a fair system.
It is. And what makes it so jarring is that you see the exact opposite end of the spectrum flourishing at the same time. The new Gilded Age in restaurant pricing.
Right. The sources mentioned a $600 suckling pig dinner.
Exactly. It just powerfully underscores that widening experiential gap. Affluent diners can absorb those costs without a thought, while huge parts of the population are struggling with basic grocery bills.
So the normalization of petty crime due to low trust and economic strain is happening right alongside this highly visible, extreme luxury consumption.
2 realities occupying the same space, but belonging to 2 different worlds. And that gap feels unsustainable. It highlights that profound disconnection between the data that says the economy is fine and the behavioral reality that says the social contract is fraying.
So what does this all mean? We've covered everything from distorted economic numbers to the quiet displacement of Hollywood roles to these stark policy choices in the U.S. and Canada. We've seen noise, we've seen gaps, and we've seen systems failing the individual.
And if we connect this all back for you, the learner, the sources today, paint a picture of this powerful, dangerous clash between official metrics and lived experience. We see it in the economy. Is inflation 2.7%? Or is it normalizing petty crime? We see it in healthcare. Is assisted dying a genuine choice? Or is it a substitute for care the system failed to provide?
This tension really defines the current moment. We're living in 2 realities at once.
It does. For you, the question to really mull over is this. How long can official metrics and policy operate in a fundamentally different reality from the way people actually feel and behave before those metrics lose all political and social meaning?
Before they just become irrelevant.
Exactly. That gap, that chasm between what the spreadsheet says and what the consumer feels, that might be the most important and least calculated risk we face today.